This is all Dad's fault. Science stuff. His tongue is blue. Oh, Jesus. Oh, no, she cried, raising her hands to her face in horror. The bedsheet was covered with a thick layer of dirt. Ooh. Hello, and welcome to GooseDrunks. Woo! Today, we're going to be reading the second half of the Goosebumps classic, Stay Out of the Basement. If you're new here, first of all, you're going to have a really hard time following along because, again, we're reading the second half of a book. But, first of all, the rules are really simple. Drink if it's stupid, drink if it's scary, and always drink responsibly. That's it. Those are the rules. It's super easy, except maybe the third one, but whatever. Where we left off. Margaret is hella grossed out because she went into her dad's room and his bed was full of like mud and worms and stuff. Gross. Wash your sheets, Dad. So she wakes up super early because she is having a hard time sleeping because her dad is turning into a plant monster. It's totally understandable. But her brother Casey does not have this difficulty. He sleeps in until 10:30, and RL just goes out, just like lists all the stuff Margaret does while she waits for her lazy brother to wake up from his lazy full night of sleep. When he finally does wake up, she pours him a glass of orange juice and they go out into the backyard where they go to the very far side of the yard so they can talk without being heard by any plants or monsters or fathers. So she tells him everything that happened, everything she saw. The dad has green blood, there's a bunch of worms in his bed, you know, usual freaky dad stuff. And they debate what to do. Margaret says, well, I did tell Diane some of it. Casey looks at her in surprise. I had to tell somebody, she said. Diane thought I should call the police. Casey is as confused about this as I am. He says, Dad hasn't done anything wrong. What would the police do? I know, Margaret replied. That's what I told Diane. But she said there's got to be some kind of law against being a mad scientist. That's stupid. He's just what? Margaret thought. What is he? Very good point, Margaret's thoughts. Very good point indeed. This is a very scary situation for two children to be in. I'm, by the way, drinking an Angry Orchard. I typically don't say the brand name of what I'm drinking, but the pun is that it's an Angry Orchard, and the dad is an angry tree trying to kill them. So you get... A few hours later, they were still in the backyard trying to figure out what to do. What? Who was outside that long? Their father called them to come in. Margaret looked at Casey in surprise. I don't believe it. He came upstairs. Maybe we can talk to him, Casey said. They both raced into the kitchen. Dr. Brewer, his Dodgers cap in place, boo, flashed them a smile as he set 2 soup bowls down on the table. Hi, he said brightly. Lunchtime. Casey like so stoked and surprised that Dad made lunch, but Margaret's like, Dad, we have to talk. Soup can wait. And Dad's like, no, we don't have much time. You gotta sit down and try my new dish. I'm so excited for you guys to try it and tell me what you think. I'm very nervous about what's in this dish. Margaret and Casey obediently took their places at the table. What is this stuff? Casey cried. The 2 bowls were filled with green, pulpy substance. It looks like green mashed potatoes, Casey said, making a face. It's something different, Dr. Brewer said, mysteriously. Okay. Standing over them at the head of the table. Go ahead, taste it. I bet you'll be surprised. Gang, don't eat that food. This is so scary. Dad, you've never made lunch for us before, Margaret said, trying to keep the suspicion out of her voice. Even before he was a plant, he never made them lunch. What kind of father is this? I just wanted you to try this, he said. You're my guinea pigs. Does he know that guinea pigs will die if you don't give them affection? Because these children might die if he doesn't give them a little bit of affection sometime soon. Your mother called this morning, he continued. Just a short while ago. I guess you were outside and didn't hear the phone ring. Aunt Eleanor's doing better. She's been moved out of intensive care. Your mom may be able to come home soon. Eat. Aren't you going to have some? Casey asked, twirling his spoon around in his fingers. No. Guys, don't eat this food, please. But Dad's like, I already ate food, so I'm stuffed. Ooh. No room in this stomach. Not me. If a person prepares me a meal and insists on not having any of it, I'm not eating that meal. Sorry, restaurants. But what is it? Casey demanded. It should taste very sweet. It's bad lunch, but all right. He stared at them, urging them to eat the green stuff. Staring into the bowl at the mysterious substance, Margaret was suddenly frozen with fear. He's too eager for us to eat this, she thought. He's too desperate, and he's never made lunch before. Why did he make this, and why won't he tell us what it is? What's going on here? I'm glad that Margaret is an intelligent human being. I don't know what she's going to do about it, but I'm glad she at least recognizes that she should be suspicious. Oh, good. Casey's expression reveals that he's wondering the same thing. That's a lot of expressing he must be doing, but fine, I'll bite, fine. Margaret continues thinking, is Dad trying to do something to us? Is this green stuff going to change us or hurt us or make us grow leaves too? What crazy thoughts Margaret realized. What do you mean she realized it? She just gaslit herself into thinking she was crazy. Finally, Margaret thinks he's giving us no choice. Her hand was trembling as she reluctantly raised the spoon to her mouth. Dun dun dun! An intense first chapter for sure. So Margaret's like slow motion raising the spoon to her face when the doorbell rings, saving her life probably. Who could that be? Dr. Brewer asks, and he lumbers out into the front hall. Margaret says, saved by the bell, because I guess that's still funny in the 90s. Who am I kidding? It's still funny now. They both pick up the bowls and rush to the sink, pulling out the wastebasket and scooping the contents of both bowls into the garbage. Then they carried the bowls back to the table and set them down beside the spoons. Smart. No one will catch on. They crept into the hall in time to see a man carrying a black briefcase step into the front entranceway and greet their father with a short handshake. Mr. Martinez! Their father exclaimed. What a surprise! Margaret very helpfully whispers to Casey, that's Dad's old boss from Polytech, but you know what? I remembered that and I haven't picked up this book in 2 months, so I'm pretty sure Casey knows this. Oh yeah, Casey says, I know! Serves me right for assuming. These kids are good. These are good kids. I said weeks ago I'd come check up on how your work is coming along, Martinez said, sniffing the air for some reason. Wellington gave me a lift. My car is in the garage. I'm not really ready, Dr. Brewer stammered, looking very uncomfortable even from Margaret's vantage point behind him. No problem, I'll just have a quick look. I've always been so interested in your work. You know that. You know it wasn't my idea to let you go. The board forced me. They gave me no choice. But I'm not giving up on you. Yeah, but did you give up on his health benefits? Boom. Come on, let's see what kind of progress you're making. Dr. Brewer couldn't hide his displeasure at Mr. Martinez's surprise appearance. He scowled and tried to block the path to the basement steps. But Mr. Martinez stepped past Dr. Brewer and pulled open the basement door. Mr. Martinez gave the two kids a wave, hoisting his briefcase as if it weighed 2 tons. Their father looked surprised to see them there. Did you kids finish your lunch? Yeah, it was pretty good, Casey lied. The answer seemed to please Dr. Brewer. Adjusting the brim of his Dodgers cap, he followed Mr. Martinez into the basement, carefully closing and locking the door behind him. Maybe he'll give Dad his job back, Casey said, like a crazy person. You know, I thought Margaret was on my side with that one, because she says, don't be stupid. If Dad really is growing plants that are part animal, he'll be famous. He won't need a job. Do you know how science works? You don't just become a famous scientist and then that sustains you. Bill Nye the Science Guy. Okay, I take it back. Casey, do you think Dad is telling us the truth? About what? About anything. I don't know, Casey said, shaking his head. Then his expression suddenly changed. There's one way to find out. First chance we get, first time Dad's away, Casey whispered. Let's go back down into the basement, see for ourselves what he's doing. Dun dun dun. Fortunately, very luckily for us and for them, they got their chance the next afternoon. Their father emerged from the basement, red metal tool chest in hand. I promised Mr. Henry next door I'd help him install a new sink in his bathroom, he explained. When are you coming back? Casey asked, glancing at Margaret. Not very subtle, Casey, Margaret and I both thought in unison. It shouldn't take more than a couple of hours, Dr. Brewer said. He disappeared out the kitchen door. It's now or never, Margaret said, glancing doubtfully at Casey. Think we can do this? Casey's like, door's locked, not a problem. My friend Kevin, who is a degenerate, taught me to pick locks last week with a paper clip. Why don't you go grab one for me and I'll show you what I can do now. It's like Ocean's 11 in here. Anyway, Margaret is just like, okay, whatever, and goes and gets him a paper clip so that he can show her his new criminal skills. Casey straightened the clip out, then poked it into the lock. In a few seconds, he hummed a triumphant fanfare. Now you're an expert lockpicker, huh? Your friend Kevin's a good guy to know, Margaret said, echoing my sentiments exactly. Margaret and I are constantly on the same page, except for that part when she was like, Dad's famous, so he won't need a job. Okay, so they go into the basement. They were hit immediately by a blast of steamy hot air. The air, Margaret realized, was so wet, so thick that droplets immediately clung to her skin. They stopped in the doorway to the plant room. The plant seemed taller, thicker, Long, sinewy tendrils drooped from thick yellow stalks. Broad green and yellow leaves bobbed and trembled, shimmering under the white light. Leaves slapped against each other, making a soft, wet sound. Gross. Everything seemed to shimmer. I love Annihilation. Long brown tendrils snaked along the dirt, wrapping themselves around other plants, around each other. He did say the word tendrils twice, but other than that, it is a pretty good descriptive paragraph. Proud of you, RL, you did it. Wow, Casey cried, impressed with this trembling, glistening jungle. Why is it so sexual? They heard breathing sounds, loud sighing, a low moan coming from the direction of the supply closet against the wall. A tendril suddenly swung out from a long stalk. Margaret pulled Casey back. So they still hear breathing. Steady, quiet breathing. Margaret, who is very perceptive, thinks to herself that these plants are definitely not normal. She took a step back, letting her eyes roam over the amazing jungle of slithering, sighing plants. She was still staring at them when she heard Casey's terrified scream. Help! It's got me! It's got me! Dun dun dun! I swear to God, if he's faking, he deserves to die. Okay, he wasn't faking, but it wasn't a plant. He somehow got grabbed by a squirrel. There's a squirrel down there. I guess there are squirrels down there now. Look, Margaret said, pointing. It's a squirrel. Look how scared it is. It must have run right into you. Oh, Casey sighed. The squirrel stopped several yards away, turned, stood up on its hind legs, and stared back at them, quivering all over. This poor squirrel. How did a squirrel get down here? Casey demanded, his voice still shaky. Margaret shrugged. Squirrels are always getting in, she said. Remember that chipmunk we couldn't get rid of? Then she glanced over to the small ground-level window at the top of the opposite wall. That window's open, she told Casey. The squirrel must have climbed in over there. Casey yells shoo and then chases it around the plants and then out the window, and it makes it outside. I feel bad for this little squirrel. Margaret's like, okay, good work. Let's get out of here. We don't know what anything is. We have no idea what to look for, and we can't tell if Dad's telling the truth or not. They probably should have realized that before they went down into the basement. Should have gone in with a plan. A plant. I'm gonna drink for that. I think that's fair. She started toward the stairs, but stopped when she heard the bumping sound. Casey, do you hear that? She searched for her brother, but he was hidden by the thick leaves of the plants. Casey? Yeah, I heard it, he answered, still out of her view. It's coming from the supply closet. The loud thumping made Margaret shudder. It sounded to her exactly like someone banging on the closet wall. I wonder what it is. Did we see Mr. Martinez leave? Casey, let's check it out, she said. No reply. The banging got louder. Casey? Why wasn't he answering her? Casey, where are you? You're frightening me, Margaret called, moving closer to the shimmering plants. Despite the intense heat, she suddenly felt cold all over. Casey? It's very scary. I would be scared. Fortunately, Casey's fine. He's just being a dumbass and not responding when she's calling to him, even though he knows it's a very dangerous room and he probably should be communicating better. Margaret, come here. I found something, he finally said. He sounded uncertain and worried. She hurried around the plants and saw him standing in front of the work table beside the supply closet. The banging from the closet had stopped. Casey, what's the matter? You scared me. Look, her brother said, holding up a dark, folded-up bundle. I found this on the floor, shoved under the work table. Casey unfolded it. It was a suit jacket, a blue suit jacket, a red and white striped necktie folded inside it. Oh my God, that's scary. Like, that's a dun-dun-dun. It's not even the end of the chapter. It's just a scary story beat. It's Mr. Martinez's. Yeah, we know. Margaret's mouth dropped open. You mean he left it here? Yeah, Margaret, he definitely left it here. He definitely took off his jacket and his tie and then ditched them in the basement. Did you see Mr. Martinez leave the house yesterday afternoon? Casey asked. No, Margaret answered, but he must have left. His car was gone. He didn't drive. Remember, he told Dad he got a lift. We love when something is set up and then has payoff, even if it's small. RL, baby steps. Casey, what are you saying? That Mr. Martinez didn't leave? That he was eaten by a plant or something? That's ridiculous. Then why were his coat and tie hidden like that? Casey demanded. Margaret didn't have a chance to respond. They both gasped as they heard loud footsteps on the stairs. Someone was hurrying down to the basement. Hide, Margaret whispered. Where? Casey asked, his eyes wide with panic. Dun dun dun. What a weird end to the chapter. Can I say, if I were RL, I would have ended the chapter at they both gasped as they heard loud footsteps on the stairs. Someone was hurrying down to the basement. Or even just loud footsteps on the stairs would have been perfectly good ending. The hide and the where seem unnecessary. Chapter 15 starts with Margaret jumping out through that small open window that they chased the squirrel out of earlier. And it's a tight squeeze, but she makes it. Also, Another thing being set up and then paid off. Granted, it happened just 2 pages before, but he really did, it seemed like, okay, what was the point of the squirrel? The point of the squirrel was to show us the open window. Also, why was the window open? Whatever. Breathing hard, they both squatted down to peer into the window. "Who is it?" Casey whispered. Margaret didn't have to answer. They both saw their father step into the white light, his eyes searching the plant room. "Why did Dad come back?" Casey asked. Margaret shushes him and then climbs to her feet and pulls Casey toward the back door and tells him to hurry. The back door was unlocked. They stepped into the kitchen just as their father emerged from the basement, a concerned expression on his face. "Hey, there you are," he exclaimed. "Hi, Dad," Margaret said, super cash. "Why'd you come back?" "Had to get more tools," he answered, studying their faces. He eyed them suspiciously. "Where were you two?" "Out in the backyard," Margaret said. "We came in when we heard the back door slam." Dr. Brewer scowled and shook his head. "You never used to lie to me before," he said. "I know you went down into the basement again. You left the door wide open. What is wrong with these two kids? Who does this? When you sneak into a place, you close the door behind you. Why would you be this way?" Margaret answers Dr. Brewer's question with a question of her own. She says, "We found Mr. Martinez's jacket and tie. What happened to him, Dad?" The question seems to catch him by surprise. "Why did he leave his jacket and tie down there?" Margaret asked. "I'm raising 2 snoops," her father griped. "Martinez got hot, okay?" "Yeah, he did." "I have to keep the basement at a very high tropical temperature with lots of humidity. I think he was in a state of shock. It's no wonder he forgot his things. But I called Martinez this morning. I'm going to drive over and return his stuff when I finish at Mr. Henry's." So that doesn't sound like a lie at all. But Margaret and Casey both buy it. They both smile. They feel relieved. It was good to know that Mr. Martinez was okay. How awful to suspect my own father of doing something terrible to someone, she thought, because she apparently hasn't been paying attention for the rest of the book. "I'd better get going," Dr. Brewer said. Carrying the tools he had picked up, he started toward the back door. That's a wildly awkward sentence, but all right, we'll keep going. He stopped at the end of the hall and turned around. "Don't go back in the basement, okay? It really could be dangerous. You could be very sorry." Margaret listened to the screen door slam behind him. Was that a warning or a threat? She wondered. Dun dun dun. Oh. Let's be back to it. So chapter 16. Margaret spends her Saturday morning biking around with Diane. It's beautiful out. They have a nice time. They had lunch at Diane's house, tomato soup and avocado salad. Thank you for that level of detail, RL. It was not exactly necessary. And then wandered back to Margaret's house, trying to figure out how to spend the rest of a beautiful afternoon. Dr. Brewer is just backing the station wagon down the drive as Margaret and Diane rode up on their bikes. He rolled down a window, a broad smile on his face. "Good news!" he shouted. "Your mom is on her way home. I'm going to the airport to get her." "Oh, that's great," Margaret exclaimed, so happy she could almost cry. I'm pretty happy, too. Finally, an actual parent has come back. So, Dad leaves, and Margaret and Diane flip through some old copies of 17 and People, listening to some music that Margaret had recently bought. The 90s are wild. At a little past 3, Diane suddenly remembered that she had a makeup piano lesson that she was late for. She rushed out of the house in a panic, jumped on her bike, yelled, "Say hi to your mom for me," and disappeared down the drive. What was the point of any of that? Margaret could have just been sitting in the living room and Dad could have come downstairs good news or whatever. But no, it had to be a whole thing. A modern day Charles Dickens, this one. Margaret stood behind the house looking out at the rolling hills, wondering what to do next to make the time pass before her mother got home. The strong swirling breeze felt cool against her face. She decided to get a book and go sit down with it under the shady sassafras tree in the middle of the yard. People can just have sassafras trees? I guess in my heart I knew that, but it also is kind of a wild pull to have as just a tree randomly growing in your yard. Casey comes running up, demanding to know where their kites are, because apparently he wants to go fly a kite. I'm not gonna put a clip of the Disney song because I don't want to get my video pulled. Anyway, Margaret's like, "Sure, I'll go fly a kite with him. It'll pass the time." This has been 2 full pages of just filler. And then she's like, "Where did we put the kites? Are they in the garage?" And then Casey says, "Oh, no, they're in the basement. I'll jimmy the lock and go down and get them." They could have just not accepted their dad's reasoning and gone in again. But no, it has to be something really stupid, he's inexplicably keeping kites down there, even though they have just said they have a garage which is, as far as I know, the only correct place to keep a kite. So Margaret goes with him because she doesn't want him to go alone. That's good sistering right there. They made their way down the stairs quickly, into the hot, steamy air, into the bright lights. The plants seemed to bend toward them, to reach out to them as they walked by. Margaret tried to ignore them. Walking right behind Casey, she kept her eyes on the tall metal shelves straight ahead. Casey got there first and started rummaging around on the lower shelves. Casey, down on his knees, started pulling boxes off the bottom shelf, and then suddenly, he stopped. "Look at this," Casey said softly. He pulled something out from behind the shelves and stood up with it bundled in his hands. Margaret saw that he was holding a pair of black shoes and a pair of blue trousers. Blue suit trousers? His face suddenly pale, his features drawn. Casey let the shoes drop to the floor. He unfurled the trousers and held them up in front of him. "Hey, look in the back pocket," Margaret said, pointing. Casey reached into the back pocket and pulled out a black leather wallet. "I don't believe this," Margaret said. "Believe it, sister." Casey's hands trembled as he opened the wallet and searched inside. He pulled out a green American Express card, odd product placement, but here we are, and read the name on it. It could have just said credit card. He pulled out a green credit card. Why? Okay. He read the name on it. "It belongs to Mr. Martinez," he said, swallowing hard. "Oh wait, I'm going to drink for the dumb credit card thing." He raised his eyes to Margaret's. "This is Mr. Martinez's stuff." Dun, dun, dun. Okay, I will say there's a typo in this copy. Look, someone professional had to look at not even that many words. There should be a quotation mark right there because he's talking again. That's how that works. Chapter 17. Drinking for the typo, though. So Casey is very upset because Dad lied, even though, obviously he lied. Maybe you're just upset because you fell for it, you fool. I don't know, I'm feeling very aggressive today. Casey stared in horror at the wallet in his hands. Mr. Martinez might have left without his jacket, but he wouldn't leave without his pants and shoes. Maybe he wouldn't, but I... All this tells me is that Casey doesn't know how to party. In the center of the room, a plant seemed to groan, the sound startling the two kids. "Dad lied," Casey said. "Dad lied to us." "What are we going to do?" Margaret cried, panic and desperation in her voice. "We've got to tell someone what's happening here, but who?" The plant groaned again. Tendrils snaked along the dirt. Leaves clapped against each other softly, wetly. Gross. I'm drinking. I don't know why RL does this to me. This is a family show. And then the banging began again in the supply closet next to the shelves. Margaret stared at Casey. "That thumping, what is it? Why didn't they look before?" "Whatever." "I think someone's in there," Margaret exclaimed. "Maybe it's Mr. Martinez," Casey suggested. "Yeah, maybe." "You think we should open the closet?" Casey asked timidly. "Yes," Margaret and I say at the same time. "I think we should. If it's Mr. Martinez in there, we've got to let him out." Casey set the wallet down on the shelf. Then they moved quickly to the supply closet. Across from them, the plant seemed to shift and move as the two kids did. They heard breathing sounds, another groan, scurrying noises. Tendrils drooped and slid. I'm drinking and you guys know why. Look at him. He's so good. "Hey, look!" Casey cried. "I see," Margaret said. The closet door wasn't just locked. A 2x4 had been nailed over it. Well, that's unfortunate. "There's someone in there. I know it," Margaret cried. "I'll get the hammer," Casey said. A few seconds later, he returned with a claw hammer. Casey's very handy for an 11-year-old. Working together, they pried the 2x4 off the door. It clattered noisily to the floor. That's a lot of rhymes and just a lot of eye rhymes in there. The banging from inside the supply closet grew louder, more insistent. "Now, what do we do about the lock?" Margaret asked, staring at it. Casey scratched his head. They both had perspiration dripping down their faces. Gross. "I don't know how to unlock it," Casey said, stumped. "What if we tried to pry the door off the way... You're telling me the closet has a more complicated lock than the entire basement? Okay, that's convenient." Anyway, Margaret's like, "We're taking the door off the hinges." "All right, Margaret, I support your drama in this situation." Working the claw of the hammer into the narrow crack, they tried prying the door on the side of the lock. When it wouldn't budge, they moved to the hinged side of the door and tried there. "It's not moving," Casey said, mopping his forehead with his arm. "Keep trying," Margaret said. "Here, let's both push it." Digging the claw in just above the lower hinge, they both pushed the handle of the hammer with all their strength. It moved a little, Margaret said, breathing hard. They kept at it. The wet wood began to crack. Gross. Finally, with a loud ripping sound, they managed to pull the door off. They both squinted into the dark closet and screamed in horror when they saw what was inside. Dun, dun, dun! Oh, what is it? What is it? Oh, I'm excited to find out.
What do you think it is, baby?
Yeah, I don't know either. Chapter 18. Look, Margaret cried, her heart thudding. She suddenly felt dizzy. She gripped the side of the closet to steady herself. They both gaped at the weird plants that filled the closet. Under the dim ceiling bulb, they bent and writhed, groaning, breathing, sighing. Branches shook, leaves shimmered and moved. Tall plants leaned forward as if reaching out to Margaret and Casey. This is all very gross. Look at that one, Casey cried. It has an arm. Oh. Yeah, that's correct. That's the correct response to that, I guess. Margaret followed Casey's stare. Casey was right. The tall leafy plant appeared to have a green human arm descending from its stalk. That's terrifying. Margaret's eyes darted around the closet. To her horror, she realized that several plants seemed to have human features. Green arms, a yellow hand with 3 fingers poking from it, 2 stumpy legs where the stem should be. She and her brother both cried out when they saw the plant with the face. Inside a cluster of broad leaves there appeared to grow a round green tomato. But the tomato had a human-shaped nose and an open mouth, from which it repeatedly uttered the most mournful sighs and groans. Big same, guys. Another plant, a short plant with clusters of broad oval leaves, had 2 green, nearly human faces, partly hidden. I can't read it all. Let's get out of here, Casey cried, grabbing Margaret's hand in fear and tugging her away from the closet. This is gross. He's right. He's correct. Gross is the word. Wait, Margaret cried, pulling her hand out of Casey's. She spotted something on the closet floor behind the moaning, shifting plants. Casey, what is that? She asked, pointing. She struggled to focus her eyes in the dim light of the closet. On the floor behind the plants, near the shelves in the back wall, were 2 human feet. Dun, dun, dun. Oh my god, that's so scary. This is just straight up body horror. Also, my cat is licking his butt behind me. We're gonna keep going. We persevere in this house. Margaret stepped cautiously into the closet. The feet she saw were attached to legs. Sometimes they are. Margaret, let's go, Casey pleaded. No, look, there's someone back there, Margaret said. A person, not a plant. She took another step. A soft green arm brushed against her side. Margaret, what are you doing? Casey asked, his voice high and frightened. Sorry, Margaret, what are you? I have to see who it is, Margaret said. She plunged through the plants to the back of the closet. Dad, she cried. Her father was lying on the floor, his hands and feet tied tightly with plant tendrils, his mouth gagged by a wide strip of electric tape. Buck wild, you guys. Not what I was expecting. Their father stared up at them, pleading with his eyes, and then Margaret dives to the floor and starts to untie him. No, stop, Casey cried and pulled her back by the shoulders. Casey, let go of me. What's wrong with you? Margaret cried angrily. It's Dad. It can't be Dad, Casey said, still holding her by the shoulders. Dad's at the airport, remember? Let's do this. Okay, so Casey's like, no, don't. And then Margaret's like, okay, fine, I'm just gonna pull the tape off his mouth. I'm not gonna untie him. It's whatever. No one's ever been tricked by anyone before, least of all children. She reached down and tugged at the elastic tape until she managed to get it off. I feel like I'm talking in like a much higher register than I normally do. I don't know why. Kids, I'm so glad to see you, Dr. Brewer said. Quick, untie me. So Casey's like, how'd you get here? And he stands above him, hands on his hips, staring down at him suspiciously. Casey might be right. I have no idea. We saw you leave for the airport. That wasn't me, Dr. Brewer said. I've been locked in here for days. Huh? Casey cried. It wasn't me. It's a plant out there. It's a plant copy of me. Ah! Please, there's no time to explain, their father said urgently, raising his leaf-covered head to look quickly toward the closet doorway. Just untie me, quick! This is very suspicious. I genuinely don't know what I would do in this situation. Granted, I find it hard to believe I'll ever be in this situation for a variety of reasons. But if I were in this situation, I don't know what I would do. And that's very scary to me, so I'm gonna drink. Margaret's like, wait, the father we've been living with is a plant, though? And he's like, yes! So Margaret's like, game. She's like, yeah, of course, and like reaches for the tendrils. And Casey's like, wait, how do we know he's telling the truth? How is Casey the sensible one here? Margaret's the point of view character. He's like, I'll explain everything, I promise. Hurry, our lives are at stake. Mr. Martinez is in here too. Startled, Margaret turned her eyes to the far wall. Sure enough, Mr. Martinez also lay on the floor, bound and gagged. Margaret couldn't stand it anymore. I'm untying him, she told Casey, and bent down to start grappling with the tendrils. Her father sighed gratefully. Casey bent down and reluctantly began working at the tendrils too. Finally, they had loosened them enough so their father could slip out. He climbed to his feet slowly, stretching his arms, moving his legs, bending his knees. "Man, that feels good," he said, giving Margaret and Casey a grim smile. "Dad, should we untie Mr. Martinez?" Margaret asked, but without warning. Dr. Brewer pushed past the two kids, made his way out of the closet. Is that what a real dad would do, or a plant dad? I've never met a plant dad before, so I don't know what one would do, but it's suspicious. Casey's like, "You said you'd explain everything." And Dr. Brewer's like, "I will." Breathing hard, he strode quickly to the wood pile against the far wall. Margaret and Casey both gasped as he picked up an axe. He spun around to face them, holding the thick axe handle with both hands. His face frozen with determination, he started toward them. "Dad, what are you doing?" Margaret cried. "Dun, dun, dun!" Oh my god, I can't believe this is the Goosebumps book in which two children get axe murdered by a plant facsimile of their father. RL, what will you think of next? Swinging the axe onto his shoulder, Dr. Brewer advanced on Margaret and Casey. He groaned from the effort of raising the heavy tool, his face reddening, his eyes wide. Excited. Ugh. Excited is not the adjective I want when my dad's flailing an axe around me. Shout it to my dad, who's never owned an axe. Good for you, Dad. "Dad, please," Margaret cried, backing up toward the jungle of plants in the center of the room. "What are you doing?" "He's not our real father," Casey cried. "I told you we shouldn't untie him." "He is our real father," Margaret insisted. "I know he is." He stared back at them, his face filled with confusion and menace, the axe in his hands gleaming under the bright ceiling lights. "Dad, answer us," Margaret demanded. "Answer us." Before Dr. Brewer could reply, they heard loud, rapid footsteps clumping down the basement steps. All three of them turned to the doorway of the plant room to see an alarmed-looking Dr. Brewer enter. He grabbed the bill of his Dodgers cap as he strode angrily toward the two kids. The hiccups. He grabbed the bill of his Dodgers cap as he strode angrily toward the two kids. "What are you two doing here?" he cried. "You promised! Here's your mother! Don't you want it?" Mrs. Brewer appeared at his side. She started to call it a greeting, but stopped, freezing in horror when she saw the confusing scene. She screamed, seeing the other Dr. Brewer, the capless Dr. Brewer, holding an axe in front of him with both hands. Her face filled with horror. She turned to the Dr. Brewer that had just brought her home. If he's a plant, where did he learn to drive? He glared accusingly at Margaret and Casey. "What have you done? You let him escape?" "He's our dad," Margaret said in a tidy little voice she barely recognized. "I'm your dad," the Dr. Brewer at the doorway bellowed. "Not him. He's not your dad. He's not even human. He's a plant." Margaret and Casey both gasped and drew back in terror. "You're the plant," the bare-headed Dr. Brewer accused, raising the axe. This is going to be fun, how they're only distinguishable because one of them is wearing a Dodgers cap. Jeez. "He's dangerous," the other Dr. Brewer exclaimed. "How could you have let him out?" Caught in the middle, Margaret and Casey stared from one father to the other. Who was their real father? Dun dun dun. I'm kind of picturing a beautiful ideal scenario in which both of them just agree to parent Margaret and Casey, and them plus the mom together equal at least one good parent. Chapter 20. Penultimate chapter, get ready. "That's not your father," Dr. Brewer with the Dodgers cap cried again. Let's call him Dodger Brewer. Dodger Brewer cried again, moving into the room. "He's a copy, a plant copy, one of my experiments that went wrong. I locked him in the supply closet because he's dangerous." "You're the copy," the other Dr. Brewer, we'll just call him Dr. Brewer, accused and raised the axe again. Margaret and Casey stood motionless, exchanging terrified glances. "Kids, what have you done?" Mrs. Brewer cried. If that's what she sounds like, I cannot remember. Her hands pressed against her cheeks, her eyes wide with disbelief. Casey seemed too frightened to reply. "I don't know what to do," Casey managed to whisper. "What can we do?" Margaret wondered silently, realizing that her entire body was trembling. "He has to be destroyed," the axe-wielding Dr. Brewer shouted, staring at his lookalike across the room. "Put down the axe! You're not fooling anyone," Dodger Brewer said. "You have to be destroyed," Dr. Brewer repeated, his eyes wild, his face scarlet, moving closer, the axe gleaming as if electrified under the white light. "Dad would never act like this," Margaret realized nonsensically. "What do you mean? This is a very unique situation." My hair looks ridiculous. "You didn't realize your dad was a plant for 100 pages. Casey and I were idiots." "Yep. We let him out of the closet, and now he's going to kill our real dad and mom, and then us. What can I do? She wondered, trying to think clearly even though her mind was whirring wildly out of control. What can I do? Uttering a desperate cry of protest, Margaret leaped forward and grabbed the axe from the impostor's hand. He gaped in surprise as she steadied her grip on the handle. It was heavier than she'd imagined. She yells at them to get back, swinging the axe around wildly, which is scary and stupid, so... Margaret, wait! Her mother cried, still too frightened to move from the doorway. The capless Dr. Brewer reached for the axe. Give it back to me! You don't know what you're doing, he pleaded, and made a wild grab for it. Margaret pulled back and swung the axe. Stay back! Everyone stay back! Thank goodness, Dr. Brewer exclaimed. We've got to get him back in the closet. He stepped up to Margaret. Give me the axe. I think Dr. Brewer might be the imposter. I'm just guessing here now at this point. Margaret turned to her mother. What should I do? Mrs. Brewer shrugged helplessly. I don't know. Adults are useless in this universe. At best, they're useless. And at worst, they're axe-wielding plants. Unreal. Princess, don't do it. The capless Dr. Brewer said softly, Princess! He called me Princess, Margaret realized. The other one never had. Does this mean that the dad in the closet is my real dad? Margaret, give me the axe! Dr. Brewer made a grab for it. Margaret backed away and swung the axe again. Get back, both of you. Stay back, she warned. I'm warning you, Dr. Brewer said. He's dangerous. Listen to me, Margaret. Her eyes darted back and forth from one to the other. She saw that each of them had a bandage around his right hand, and it gave her an idea. Casey, there's a knife on the wall over there, she said, still holding the axe poised. Get it for me, fast! Girl, you've got an axe in your hand if you're trying to draw blood. So Casey finds the knife and then hurries back to Margaret with it. Margaret lowers the axe and takes the long-bladed knife from him. There's too many sharp weapons in one area. Margaret, give me the axe! Dr. Brewer insisted impatiently. Margaret, what are you doing? The man from the supply closet asked, suddenly looking frightened. I have an idea, Margaret said hesitantly. She took a deep breath. Then she stepped over to the man from the supply closet and pushed the knife blade into his arm. Dun, dun, dun. My dude, you don't have to fully stab someone to see if their blood is red. You can just do a pinprick. That's what they do at the doctor's office to make sure my blood is red. He needs that arm for science. Chapter 21, the final chapter. Get ready. Ow! He cried out as the blade cut through the skin. Red blood trickled from the hole. Gross. He's our real dad, she told Casey. Here, Dad. She handed him the axe. Margaret, you're wrong, the man in the baseball cap cried in alarm. He's tricked you. He's tricked you. The capless Dr. Brewer moved quickly. He picked up the axe, took 3 steps forward, pulled the axe back, and swung with all his might. Dr. Brewer opened his mouth wide and uttered a hushed cry of alarm. The cry was choked off as the axe cut easily through his body, slicing him in two. Gee, I hope she guessed right. If not, this is a pretty gruesome turn for the book to take. A thick green liquid oozed from the wound, and as the man fell, his mouth locking open in disbelief and horror, Margaret could see that his body was actually a stem. He had no bones, no human organs. The body thudded to the floor. Green liquid puddled around it. Princess, we're okay, Dr. Brewer cried, flinging the axe aside. Not safe. Not safe axe behavior. You guessed right. It wasn't a guess, Margaret said, sinking into his arms. I knew my real dad would have red blood. He's a red-blooded dad American. I want a shirt that says, I knew my real dad would have red blood on it. That's something I want. We're okay, Mrs. Brewer cried. No thanks to you, Mom. How's your sister? She's still in the hospital? You're the worst mom and sister ever. We're okay. We're all okay. All 4 of them rushed together in an emotional family hug. By dinner time, things had almost returned to normal. They'd finally managed to welcome... How? Their dad was in the closet for months, replaced by a plant dad who liked the Dodgers. How does it just take one evening for things to get almost back to normal? That doesn't track. There should be some intense therapy before that happens. Mr. Martinez had been rescued from the supply closet, not too much worse for wear. He and Dr. Brewer had had a long discussion about what had happened and about Dr. Brewer's work. He expressed total bewilderment as to what Dr. Brewer had accomplished, but he knew enough to realize it was historic. Was it? After Mr. Martinez was driven home, Dr. Brewer disappeared into the basement for about an hour. He returned grim-faced and exhausted. I destroyed most of the plants, he explained. I had to. They were suffering. Yikes. It's very heavy. Later, I'll destroy the rest. Every single plant? Mrs. Brewer asked. Well, there are a few normal ones that I can plant out back in the garden, he replied. So at dinner, he finally explains to Margaret, Casey, and Mrs. Brewer what happened. And also us, I guess, by extension. I was working on a super plant, he said, trying to electronically make a new plant using DNA elements from other plants. Then I accidentally cut my... That's nonsense. Continue. Then I accidentally cut my hand on a slide. I didn't realize it, but some of my blood got mixed in with the plant molecules I was using. When I turned on the machine, my molecules got mixed in with plant molecules, and I ended up with something that was part human, part plant. That's gross, Casey exclaimed, and he's right. I'm gonna drink. Well, I'm a scientist, Dr. Brewer replied, so I didn't think it was gross. I thought it was pretty exciting. And here I was, inventing an entirely new kind of creature, playing God. He didn't say that last part. So the plants with the faces, apparently, this is his explanation for that. Those were things I made by inserting human materials into plant materials. Gross. No, I kept putting them in the supply closet. I got carried away. I didn't know how far it could go, how human I could make the plants. I could see that my creations were unhappy and suffering, but I couldn't stop. It was too exciting. If someone give this guy an ethics class, holy crap. Their dad's a bad person. He might not be a plant, but he still sucks. I couldn't tell anyone. I was too involved. Then one day, I went too far. I think all of that, the part where you said I saw they were suffering but I didn't stop, was the part where you went too far. But okay, the part that affected you directly was the bit that you're taking issue with. I created a plant that was an exact copy of me in almost every way. He looked like me. He sounded like me. He had my brain, my mind. But he still acted like a plant in some ways, Margaret said. He ate plant food. And he wasn't perfect. He had flaws, but he was strong enough and smart enough to overpower me, to lock me in the closet, to take my place, and to continue my experiments. And when Mr. Martinez arrived unexpectedly, he locked him in the closet too, so that his secret would be safe. Was the head full of leaves one of the flaws? Casey asked, like an idiot. What if Dr. Brewer was just like, no, that's how we look now? Yes! Oh my god. Dad, Margaret said, you have leaves on your head too. He reached up and pulled one off. I know, he said, making a disgusted face. It's really gross, huh? When I cut my hand, some of the plant materials mixed with my blood got into my system, he explained. Then I turned on the machine. The machine created a strong chemical reaction between the plant materials and my blood. Then my hair fell out overnight, and the leaves began to sprout. Don't worry, guys, the leaves are falling out already. I think my hair will grow back. Yay! I was so worried. If Mr. Martinez convinces the board to give me my job back, I'll clear out the basement and turn it into the best game room you ever saw! Yay! It's the least you could do. Maybe buy them some therapy while you're at it. Maybe first, actually. Maybe prioritize that. We're all alive and safe, Dr. Brewer said, hugging both kids at once. Thanks to you two. It was the happiest dinner Margaret could remember. Dr. Brewer headed for the basement. Hey, where are you going? His wife, I don't know why she sounded like that, but I'm not going to do that again. His wife called suspiciously. I'm just going down to deal with the rest of the plants, Dr. Brewer assured her. I want to make sure that everything is gone, that this horrible chapter in our lives is over. By the end of the week, most of the plants had been destroyed. A giant pile of leaves, roots, and stalks were burned in a bonfire that lasted for hours. So let me get this straight. He imbued these plants with consciousness, let them suffer for a month in his hot-ass basement, and then burned them in a fire in a backyard. Bring him in front of a board. Anything. A few tiny plants had been transplanted outside. All the equipment had been dismantled and trucked to the university. On Sunday, Margaret found herself standing in back by the garden, staring up at the golden hills. It's so peaceful now, she thought happily. So peaceful here and so beautiful. The smile faded from her face when she heard the whisper at her feet. Margaret! Oh no. She looked down to see a small yellow flower nudging her ankle. Margaret! The flower whispered. Help me! Please help me! I'm your father, really! I'm your real father! Dun dun dun! End of book! It's done. We did it. We did it, gang. I'm proud of us. Okay, so I liked this one, actually. It had a lot, it didn't have as many of the egregious sins that I've complained about in RL Stine's masterpieces before. I love a cliffhanger ending, although I really don't think that flower is her dad. That makes no sense. That's absolute nonsense. Yeah, I like it. I like that the two kids generally acted pretty believably. The horror of just not being able to trust your parent might be a replacement, like, monster that just looks like your parent, is genuinely scary, and something I think that would appeal to, like, not appeal to, kind of, that would really strike a chord in a lot of kids. I mean, I think it's scary. It's scary. Anyway, I rate this book 5 out of 5 plants. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you guys who support me on Patreon. I really appreciate everyone. If I'm going to link to my Patreon in the info below and on one of these links that I'm somewhere around here. I don't remember where, but the Patreons were the ones who scrolled by just now. They're very cool people. And yeah, don't forget to smash that like button, or I'll have to make a plant copy of you and keep you in my closet.